Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Storybook and Drupal, seamless front-end integration for decoupled sites. This is exactly why you should never let the marketing team write your title for your for your presentation. So yeah, let me tell you a little bit about me. So that's me. My name is Jamie Holleran. I'm from Scotland. So like, if you don't, are you from Scotland as well?
No. Scottish heritage.
Ah, very good. I think everyone does. But yeah, so if you don't understand me, then I mean, you're probably not the only one. So don't worry about it. Yeah, this picture here, I thought you can already see my face, so I thought I'd give you some cakes. So this is the Ritz Hotel in London where I was taking afternoon tea. It was very nice. You should go. So yeah, so this is the agenda. We have a 50-minute talk. This was originally supposed to be a 25-minute talk, so if we're kind of just stretching it a little bit at the end, you know why. But yeah, and for those of you that count, you'll probably be able to see that that doesn't exactly make up to 50 minutes if you add them up, but yeah, what's a few minutes between friends? So yeah, cool. The intro. So the first part of this is mostly going to be like slides and some words on the screen, and then we're going to have some actual code and whatnot. So I was boasting to everyone the last few days that live code demos are dumb and you shouldn't do them because they go badly and all the rest. And I had this big plan of making like videos that I would just play of pre-recorded, and then I was like, man, this takes a long time. So you get a live code demo and you get a live code demo and everyone gets a live code demo. So yeah, cool. So that is a completely blank slide, and it shouldn't be, and I have no idea why. Just give me one moment. This has started well. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I don't know how the slides work. So yeah, Amazing Labs, we do two types of decoupled websites. We do the full decoupled kind of React front end style, and we also do what we call progressively decoupled, or some of you might have heard it as semi-decoupled or softly decoupled. So when do we decide, or how do we decide to do each? So the first one is quite obvious when you have multiple front ends, and obviously you want to be able to provide an abstraction layer behind that, and if a client requests it, then you do it because they're paying you money for it. And the other side is if you have a single front end and no planned development for the front ends, then this is easier. So what I'm going to take you through is roughly a demo of our integrations with Storybook using a sort of switched up, currently in development, super bleeding edge project. That's for you. And also I'm going to talk a little bit about our tool belt. This is like a kind of beginner talk, so I want to make sure that everyone has something to take from it. So I'm going to tell you some top secret Amazing Labs stuff that I had to get permission from the CEO to talk about. This is the CEO of Amazing Labs, by the way, so you know, like, clap really loud at the end, please. That's my boss. Cool. So I can find my mouse. Cool. So, progressive decoupling, how do we do it and why? So, first of all, we use three very vital modules. First of all, GraphQL, which I'm sure most of you have heard of or are currently using. GraphQL Twig, which allows you to place GraphQL fragments alongside Twig templates, or alternatively inside Twig templates. A few people who have never seen it before, they go, inside templates? We'll get to that, don't worry, we'll get to it. And the components module. That's something, if anyone knows my talented colleague John Albin Wilkins, that's something that he built, and it allows people to essentially use Twig namespaces to pull in templates from somewhere else, and allows us to use Storybook as the basis for our themes. So it's pretty cool. Why do we do it? Well, it's easier, to be honest. That's a pretty good reason. It costs less money to do. We all already know Twig from Drupal development, I guess. So we don't need to learn React or any other front-end technology. We control the data flow, which is the real bonus of GraphQL. My friend here, actually, Stu, over here, I borrowed a little bit from his presentation. He is doing, if you're interested in this, he's actually doing a primer on GraphQL and Twig tomorrow. So you should go and see that, check it out, it's pretty cool. So if we want to talk about how the Drupal flow works, just briefly. So Drupal accepts requests, maps it to the controller, fetches the data, builds responses, pushes it through the theme. And you have various pre-processes and hooks and stuff that fire off. And I'm sure most people have, if you worked on any of the sort of back-end style front-end development on Drupal, it's a bit of a pain sometimes. So this allows us to essentially take control of the entire data flow. So talking about SQL in templates, I don't know if anyone is old enough that you remember back in the day. Yeah, there is. So we used to have like PHP and Get and SQL fragments and stuff inside PHP templates. You remember that? It was disgusting days. Well, when the whole world of development laughed at us because we used PHP, and I mean they still do, but they have less justification to do so. So often when we tell people that we put GraphQL fragments directly inside templates or alongside templates, they're like, "Whoa, why do you do that? You're a grown man." It's like, well, actually, it's a good idea, and I'm going to tell you why. So it's a little bit different, obviously, from putting SQL fragments or direct queries directly into templates, because, as we all know, because we are all very educated people, GraphQL is an abstraction over a data store. It's not the data store itself. So GraphQL doesn't care about the implementation behind whatever's happening. It just cares that you have a fragment, it's going to execute it and return whatever you tell it to return. So that means you can grab the data, push it through the template. It's pretty easy. I'm going to show you something that gives me the chills. So, who has seen this before? So,
I wrote that.
Yeah. So yeah, this is. I actually have some Sublime text stuff up here. I wonder if I can just. So I don't know where this mouse goes. No, that's not it. So I'm going to pull this over here. So, sorry. There we go. So this is Sublime text. So now, I'll be honest, this is Drupal 7, because we don't do this for Drupal 8 because we do a lot of progressively decoupled websites. But this is an example from a Drupal 7 website that we have in production currently. There's nothing specific to the client. So, but I mean that's just one preprocessor. We have inner themes because we like structure and organisation. I don't know how many people know about Amazing Labs, but we're a Swiss company. I'm not Swiss, but they love their organisation and their structure. The Swiss are crazy for that sort of stuff. So yeah, we have entire directories that are pre-process, and then we have separate files for nodes and views. If we have to, I don't know why you would want to pre-process it, but it happens. I've seen it. It's nasty. So yeah, this is the sort of thing that we want to avoid. So let me go back to the presentation, and I think I've skipped a couple of slides there as well, but that's all right. Cool. So yeah, that's exactly what we want to avoid. And I've lost my speaker notes again. So sorry guys, 2 seconds. This is going really well. Where is the? Does anyone know how this works?
That one.
That one.
Yep. Center for you.
Aha. There we go. Thanks. So, yeah. One of the things that I want to talk about is the process that we have at Amazing Labs. So we're going to get to the storybook, the good stuff, shortly. But I want to tell you the stuff that we build around it, how we actually build our websites. So, our development stack. So, we have something. This is the top secret stuff, by the way. Forget about storming Area 51. You want to storm Amazing Labs as well. We have some top secret stuff going on. So, we have something called Silverback, and it's actually a publicly available repo, and I'll actually pull it up on the screen shortly. And it is a development environment that allows us to quickly spin up Drupal websites with all of the things that we need in every site that we seem to produce, or at least 95% of them. It saves time. And there are it's called Silverback after the gorilla, Silverback gorilla, and it has 4 limbs. So we have the developer experience, which allows us to quickly spin up a Drupal website just with bare bones PHP 7 on your Mac or whatever you want to use, rather than using something like Docker or VirtualBox. In fact, that's quite a good question. Who uses like Docker containers or something similar in local development? Cool. And who uses like virtualization, like Vagrant or something like that? Yeah. And does anyone use like MAMP or XAMPP or anything like that? Yeah. It's a lie. He's lying. So yeah, I mean, obviously, so we've all used these sorts of tools, and they all have their advantages and disadvantages. Like the virtualized like things like Vagrant with VirtualBox, like it's huge, like 2-3 gigabyte sometimes boxes. You've got Docker containers, which although they run incredibly quickly in the cloud, as we know very well. Mishi here is the CEO of Amazy.io, which is our hosting platform. We have something called Lagoon. So I pronounce it funny because I'm Scottish, but I hope you understand what that is. And that is blazing fast, but when it comes to, most of us are quite trendy and we use Macs, except for the ultra hardcores that use like Ubuntu or whatever. It runs like a dog, quite frankly. It's like a sick dog at that. It's terrible. It's really slow. Like trying to rapidly develop something for a demo or whatever, it's not a good developer experience. So Silverback basically allows us to install a Drupal install profile using SQLite as the data backend, locally using PHP 7. MySQL or MariaDB would be a performance improvement if you wanted to add that in, and you can do if you want. You're not restricted to that, but if you just want like 2 or 3 commands, then that'll get you there. So that's the developer experience. We also have GraphQL as the core, because obviously most of the stuff we do now is at least progressively decoupled, sometimes fully decoupled. Workspaces. Who here does anything to do with internationalization? A little bit, yeah. So one of the cool things and difficult things about working for Amazy Labs is that obviously we're based in Central Europe, in Switzerland. So many of our clients are English speaking, but they have markets in Germany, or alternatively, they exist in Switzerland themselves, which obviously has 3 main languages. They speak Italian, French, and mostly German. So we have to cater for our clients who need to communicate with all of those people. So yeah, Workspaces is essentially a way of separating out different internationalized content areas. So you get to have like a German language content area and an English language one or an Italian one, and they are completely distinct from each other, and you can port content between the two and create translations, and they live in the various different places. It's all within the one Drupal site. Think of it as like an improvement on multi-site. If anyone's ever used Drupal multi-sites, like we used to use them quite a lot for internationalization. So this it gives our editors like much finer grained control over markets. And we also have something in there that we will be releasing to the public quite soon called Delivery, which is a kind of entity system that allows us to deliver content between workspaces as a package with media objects and that sort of thing. So we have, am I allowed to name clients, or am I allowed to name drop here? Yeah. So we work with Daimler, or Daimler we might call it, like they have like Smart and Mercedes-Benz and all that sort of thing. So they obviously have global markets. So currently we are building their content platform, which has to deliver content to something like 50 different language markets. So workspaces and deliveries are really important there. And then the final limb of the beast is the editor experience. So who uses paragraphs quite often on their websites? No? not many people. I expected more, actually.
Layout builder now.
Layout builder. Okay, because I was going to mention that later. That's pretty cool. So we have an editor based on CK5 Editor 5 that basically allows you to build. We call it sections. So rich content experiences for content editors that looks exactly the same in the editing platform as it does on the front end. And I'll give you a little demo of that later, but it's obviously kind of out of scope for this talk. So obviously we have Drupal, we have Storybook, which is our pattern library. We use Cypress for browser testing. So I don't know how many people do browser testing, but we find it really handy. And a little shout out to nvarc. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's like basically like a Unix-based environment switching tool that means that you can define env files locally in your development environment, and that takes care of all of your environment variables. So sorry, let me just take a drink. So yes, this is roughly the input you need to create a project from Silverback. So who uses Drupal Composer or something similar now to run Drupal? Yeah, so pretty much everyone now. It's an awesome thing. We're finally off the island and into the modern world of package management. So yeah, you create a new project using Drupal Composer. You require Amazing Labs Silverback, which is our roll your own package, and then initialize the thing. We used their env to read the nvarc files that I was talking about. Do another Composer install, because you need to make sure you get your patches in, and then we use Yarn as our front end package manager. So, go on to the good stuff, the stuff that you actually came to see. So, who uses pattern libraries or UI component libraries? Yeah? So quite a number of people. So this is a beginner talk, so apologies to those people who already know what a pattern library is, but we'll have to cover everyone. So yeah, they're known often as UI component libraries. They allow the production of atomic design systems, which allows us to break down a website layout into basic components, and that means we can build the implementation from those components, and in theory things get faster as we go on. There are many well-known variants. So Material Design by Google. Has anyone used that? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, to me it seems a bit like GitHub, or what does GitHub use? The front end framework, Bootstrap. So it feels a bit bootstrappy to me. So I'm not a big fan, but it's decent. Pattern Lab, which is one of the first ones that originated Storybook, and there's about a million more. And a pattern library, the actual idea of a pattern library was coined by a guy called Brad Frost. If people know him, like a really famous front end guy. Yeah, so that covers that. Why Storybook? Is that alright?
That first bullet point is it JavaScript or PHP?
It's JavaScript. Yeah. There we go. Finally, good reaction. So yeah, it supports Twig. And we all already know Twig because we do front end for Drupal. That's great. It's an add-on. They literally just call it Storybook HTML, and it is a plugin for Storybook. By the way, just to say, we're going to have Q&A at the end, but if anyone wants to shout out or put your hand up, feel free. I'm happy to do that. So yeah, it has lots of useful plugins. One of the ones we use mostly is accessibility. So it actually will live analyze your front end components and tell you if they break any accessibility rules, like wrong font color or size, or if you don't have alt tags on your images, that sort of thing. You can use it to mock data, which is what we really like because it fits really nicely in with our GraphQL paradigm. It supports TypeScript. Now, I don't know if anyone uses TypeScript, but TypeScript is like the superset of JavaScript. So you can use plain old JavaScript inside TypeScript, but it's much easier to debug. Your editor should be able to give you all of the properties in a TypeScript object and that sort of thing. So it's really easy, and I think it makes you look cooler. If you say hey man, what are you using? TypeScript. Well, you're just on JavaScript. That's not so good. So yeah, it makes you look kind of cool that way. And as we all know, development is all about looking cool. So it also supports React, so that helps us with, like, if we're doing the fully decoupled web apps, then obviously we can build it in React as well. I should say at this point, by the way, just so we're clear, I'm not actually a front-end developer. So, like, if you have any really like in-depth front-end questions, John Alban Wilkins is actually at the back of the room, so you can ask him, and he'll be able to tell you. Cool. So I'm actually, because I like it, this is Storybook here, and this is all the things that it supports. So you can see, like, React, React Native, Vue, Angular, HTML, which is the one we use. Like, it's really cool. About 10 million plugins that you can get from it. Yeah, I would thoroughly recommend that you check it out if you've never used it before. It's like super cool. So yeah, anyway, back to it. So yeah, that's that for that. So the good stuff, this is the live code demo. I'm at this point, I'm wishing that I had actually prepared the videos, but here we go. So let's switch to this. We're going to come out of here for a minute. So this is, like I said before, we use our Silverback. This allows us to serve Drupal websites from Drush. So literally we just run Drush serve. Once you've got it installed, we use a command Silverback setup and it will actually install it, but it takes a while, and you know, I don't have that many jokes, so you can just imagine it kind of looks a bit like Composer. And then if we, in fact, we'll try the localhost version. Here we go. So this is our based on a website that we are currently developing for production. So I've had to remove this sort of branding stuff, so there should be like a logo and things there. It usually looks a bit nicer, but you know, we can't use people like that in demos. So yeah, this is our Silverback install. This is progressively decoupled, and let me go through exactly how that works. So the first thing we need to do is create a theme. So we'll get PHP Storm on presentation mode, and we'll walk through it. Cool. So the components module that I was telling you about, that John wrote, this allows us to define this in our Drupal theme info file. So what this basically tells us is that we will have a library of Twig components that exist somewhere else, and we declare the path here. So I wonder if I can get the actual sidebar on here as well, because toolbar. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to take out our presentation mode for now, and we can just zoom in. So yeah, this is the layout of our. Can we? Everyone see this? Okay. Is that a bit small?
It's a bit small.
Yeah. Let's see if we can zoom in there. See, I was hoping to show the presentation mode and the toolbar on the left hand side, but does anyone know how to do this?
Does Command plus work? Yeah.
Yeah, I did try that, but
Have the main area selected.
the main area.
So select some. The editor. Try this motion with your fingers. Tension spread.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh,
There you go.
class. Doesn't really work for here, so.
Yeah, the sidebar is never scalable in PHP Storm.
I should have probably known that before I did this talk. But, well, anyway, okay. So I'll just tell you what this is. So we have obviously we have our basic files for a Composer project. So we have our composer.json. We also, because we run a hosting service, Amazy.io, that has Lagoon, we have, like, you can, if you want, run a Silverback project within Docker. if you want, and we also support Lando as well. So we have Lando files and Lagoon files. So if you don't want to run the SQLite version, you can literally just do Docker compose up and it'll work for you. So it covers all bases there. And like I said, it's based on the Docker containerization system we use at Amaze.io, so it kind of goes, fits straight in. So yeah, I showed you that we define the component library, and we have here a Storybook directory. So this directory here is where we keep all of our stories. Now I wish I could zoom in, but that's basically directories named after the component they represent, and inside there we have a CSS file, which is usually SCSS, it's not actually normal CSS, a Twig file, and then a GraphQL fragment. We also have a TypeScript file that allows us to define our stories, and this is the cool bit about Storybook I'm going to show you. So it's relatively simple. Now, if I go to, this is the nice thing about monolithic repos. So we keep Storybook and Drupal in the same thing, and Storybook also will run just with yarn run Storybook. So I have another terminal window there, and this is actually our Storybook implementation. So this is live, running on localhost, and this is all of our components that we want to use. So we have some like global styles like typography, colors, that sort of thing, and then we'll get into some of the more meaty stuff. So a good place to start is the header. So this might be a little bit hard to see. Normally we have a logo up in this area, but again we had to remove it. And we have a menu that has a sort of drop down feature. So I will run through the code and we can talk about it if you like. Let me close this stuff. So navigation, and let's zoom in a little bit. So yeah, you can see this is I've got PHP Storm set up to use these includes. And this is how we pass in our GraphQL fragments and our GraphQL data objects, I guess. How does this work in Storybook? Well, that's quite easy. Because we define this in TypeScript, so we import the things that we need, and this is the hook that allows you to add a story to Storybook. So it's literally like expressing a story. So in this case, this is the navigation, and we want to add the navigation bar and the header. So we define our data objects just using plain old JavaScript. So you see where we have the import, the country switcher data, and the data for the mobile. So these are all files that literally just export constants or global objects, and that allows us to mock the GraphQL data that we have. So, and I'll also show you, so this is our fragment for the menu links. So we can go into GraphQL Explorer as an example. Here. So sorry, this is just me messing about. And we can actually make some of these queries. So has anyone seen the GraphQL Explorer before? Some of you? Yeah, so it's really cool. It's called Graphical, and it comes with like the GraphQL package. It's not something that we built, as much as I'd like to take credit for that. But we utilize it very heavily, and it allows you to make GraphQL queries straight to your GraphQL engine. And for this reason, it's pretty handy for front-end developers, because what we want to do in this case is shift a little bit of responsibility for getting the data structure correct to the front end. So the way that works, I guess, is that normally, I'm sure everyone's been there, we get a design in from whoever does the design, and the front end person says, okay, that looks good, I can do that, and they maybe split it up into a UI component library or a pattern library, and then they think, well, we need some mock data, so they just come up with something that looks roughly right to them, but perhaps they don't actually understand how the data is structured, and that goes back to what I was saying before about the pre-processes and things like that in Drupal. Like, sometimes no one really knows. That's like the real kicker for Drupal, is like it goes through about 1,000 hoops before it gets to the endpoint. So who knows what's going to happen to it in between? So using GraphQL as this abstraction allows us to define exactly what we want. And for the more back-end inclined people, I'll kind of run you through some like data producers and data providers for GraphQL Drupal, and just to show you exactly how we do it. So yeah, you can press Control Space, and for example, let's try the language switcher. So language switch links, and we want the name and we want the URL. Let's run that, and there we have it. So that gives us the name of the language, and then the current page for a particular language available on the website. So usually with that ISO code, that's how we usually structure our multilingual content. So that's how it works here. Let me bring up the actual language switcher. Why is this? There we go. So you can see the language switcher here uses some test data. So if we go back to the actual JavaScript file for the data that we import, so bear in mind, just going over what we've just seen, the navigation component. Now the language switcher has its own component, I'm just showing you to kind of, because obviously these things are nested. So yeah, we import this data here, and then we pass it to the header using a simple JavaScript object, basically. Yeah? Go on.
One question.
Yes.
This might be a little technical, you can tell me to wait till the
Yeah,
end.
yeah, no, go on.
That Twig file right up top there,
Mhm.
that HTML.twig file,
Yep.
that is using the Twig JS renderer to handle the Twig.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And maybe John, maybe he has, is there a perfect parity between the Twig JS renderer and the PHP Twig renderer?
No. There is fairly good parity, and there's also an npm package that we use that will mock the Drupal filters that Drupal adds to Twig. So it will mock all of those, I think.
Like T and
Yeah.
Yeah, but it basically, it's a complete mock. So like you give it a string, and it just gives you the same string
which
back.
is
Doesn't
fun.
do any real
Perfect
fancy
for
stuff.
these.
But it allows the Twig JS to run all the Drupal filters and still give you data back that you close enough to what you're expecting.
So you don't need to rely on PHP doing this.
No.
You're not handcuffed to PHP to do this level. You're keeping
Exactly.
it totally JavaScript, which is why Storybook is able to just consume this and understand
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
That's right.
It's
It's
this
not
is.
perfect. You're probably going to run into some weird edge case or
I'll show you one. Yeah.
mostly.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, it is really powerful. Like, that is one of the main reasons we went with this, because it does support Twig, and that's pretty awesome because we only need to write this once. The point of this is that as a back-end developer, I want to put all of the work onto you front-end guys. Just like, you build it, I'll show you how to write a GraphQL query, you get the mock data, stick it into your TypeScript file, and then, yeah. What?
Do you have an example repo publicly that shows this strategy or practice?
Yeah, there will be one either tomorrow or the next day. I just need to kind of sanitize some things. So apologies for not having it ready in advance. That was the intention, but there are a few things that I need to sanitize out of this. But yeah, I wrote a blog post on this actually, which kind of, it covers roughly what we're talking about here today. So you can go on the Amazing Labs website, and it's using Twig and with Storybook and Drupal, and it gives you some links to some other useful blogs that we have. But yeah, it tells you how to set up your theme and whatnot. But yeah, I will get an actual real live repo that you can go and play with.
Kind of related, so you mentioned like Storybook for HTML.
Yes.
Is it Storybook for HTML or Storybook for Twig? It's like two packages.
I think John, are we using HTML or Twig? I thought it was HTML, but I'm not sure.
Storybook for HTML.
Yeah.
And then there's an NPM module called Twig Loader, which loads Twig file. It tells Webpack how to load a Twig file. So then you just import the Twig file in your JavaScript file, and then Webpack knows how to get all the Twig.js to parse the Twig file and give you HTML back.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I just want to make sure I did the pieces, but yeah, also a sample repo would be
Cool. Yeah. Sorry about that again, but yeah, I will definitely get it, and I'll get the Amazing Labs people to tweet about it as well, so that we know. But yeah, have a look at that blog. That it kind of covers the basics of what we do, although not the intimate nitty gritty of it. But yeah. So yeah. So going back to Drupal, then you can see this is the actual language switcher. Now, I have accidentally installed like pretty much every language under the sun here, so like it doesn't look very nice. But this goes back to the GraphQL file, because for the back-end developers, all we need, I don't know if you can see this very well, but you simply, I should be speaking through the mic, but you name the GraphQL fragment the same as your Twig file, but you append it with .gql. You can also put them directly inside the Twig templates, but it's not quite as clean and abstracted and whatnot. So yeah, we tend to put them alongside each other. And to kind of take one step back, the nice thing about this is that it takes all of the GraphQL fragments at once and executes one query. So, and then it utilises Drupal's already existing caching strategies, but has its own as well. So if you see this query here as an example, the query isn't important, but you see why this has got this is like lots of random letters in front of it. I don't know if you can see that properly. That's because the caching is so good that I struggle to turn it off. So this is a way of aliasing a GraphQL query to a shortcut, so you just change the alias every time and then it breaks the cache. Yeah, that is a bug in the I think the GraphQL module that we need to fix, or someone needs to fix. Obviously, Amazing Labs is heavily involved in the contribution, but we're not the only people that do it, so it's not all our fault. So yeah, and as you can see, I mean the GraphQL query, it's not exactly the same as what we just ran, but it's pretty simple, and then that translates. So like this is literally this is literally the same template. There is no other template. And if we can go into the theme briefly, you can see, so inside web, and then we have themes, custom. So I wish you could see this a bit bigger, but I'll maybe just read out what it says. So we have a Storybook base theme, and like I've already said, we import the component library. We set this up. It's pretty basic. We use this for every theme that we write that is being used under our progressively decoupled paradigm. And we define some libraries. And this, I can't tell if you can see it, but this is a symlink again to Storybook. So Storybook, when we build it, we have a command which I'll run through in a minute that builds the library for the backend, or rather for the actual Drupal implementation. So obviously you can see here, like, this is live. That's another nice thing about Storybook, is like if you change something, then it happens like in the browser. So live reloading. It's pretty cool. So yeah, going back to this, when we build the library, we run yarn build library, and it will automatically build the assets for the actual Drupal implementation. And then again, we don't have any sort of input into that at the theme level. We just have a symlink that links to the generated files in the Storybook component of our repo, and it does it for us, so we never need to worry about that. And then we have the actual implementation of our theme. So in this example theme, we just define the base theme as Storybook. We define our various regions that we want to implement. We have our own libraries if we want to do some like custom JavaScript Drupal behaviors, that sort of thing. And then this is where it maybe gets a little bit less easy, but it's still pretty easy. It's just we also have GraphQL fragments embedded in the actual theme. So if I zoom in here, you can see first of all, this is the components module again. Like we literally just extend the storybook page.html.twig, and then we run a main GraphQL query. So this is the query that brings pretty much everything together and makes some overall requests, and then this packs up the fragments and executes the entirety of the thing. And we still do have some theme specific templates, because obviously there isn't a one-to-one relationship between the way we implement our front-end libraries and the way Drupal renders things. We always are going to have things like node templates or specific like view implementation templates or view modes, display modes, that sort of thing. But yeah, so it's still pretty cool, and we simply define blocks for each of our GraphQL fragments that we are importing, and it does the job pretty easily. We try and keep them as logicless as possible. Like we want to keep this as simple as possible, but you know, like nothing's ever easy with building websites. So that's where we are. I don't know how much time we have left.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So let me go back to the presentation. I just want to briefly talk about the gotchas, because I did say it was like seamless front-end integration, and that's kind of not exactly true. So we sometimes have situations where like data producers for GraphQL or resolvers aren't created yet for some reason. Say, I don't know, for example, the front end involves some sort of crazy thing that brings together tweets and YouTube videos and crams them all into one horrible social media package that the client really wants. I'm sure you've all been there. Like, so we have to write a custom data producer for that. So we have this is our schema. This is for the back end and client people. So yeah, it is pretty heavy. So there is work ongoing just now. This uses GraphQL version 4, so it has less that comes out of the box. But we are working on dynamically creating schemas with like YAML configuration and stuff. But I actually had to do that as a ticket at Amazy Labs, and it's not as easy as it sounds. So we're still working on it. But yeah, so sometimes we have resolvers that aren't written yet, or data producers that aren't written yet. That happens. So yeah, we have to approximate. So sometimes, rather than working independently, the front end dev might come to me and say, like, "Hey man, like, how's this data roughly going to look?" So we sit together and we write it. That's it's not ideal, but obviously, like, I came up with a really cheesy marketing phrase actually here. Decoupled code helps to recouple teams. Yeah. So yeah, I hope this never goes on the internet. So yeah. In Scotland I will get killed for this. So yeah, like we're working on like a library of resolvers, and I think like with each release of the module, as well as like custom resolvers, like more and more things will be available. One of the other gotchas here is that like some things aren't out of the box like they normally are. Like I was going to show you a breadcrumb implementation, but I wasn't quite ready yet, and this was kind of a bit flaky enough as it is, so I didn't want to show you experimental code. But with like normal out the box, you know, like typical Drupal, that's quite easy. It's a breadcrumb, and you like put it into your theme region, and then it just renders it and it knows what it's doing. Like, we don't have one for GraphQL. Well, at least version 4. Version 3 has one, but we use version 4 because it's an active development. So that took quite a while, and because GraphQL needs to rely on the context of the request that is being made, we have to use sub-requests within GraphQL resolvers in order to figure out like what the current path is. That sounds pretty straightforward. You can pretty much do that in Twig, but we need to implement a sub-request for GraphQL to be able to do that properly. So yeah, and also I've said front-end developers need to learn a little bit more. That's not necessarily a terrible thing, because I think that like the more back-enders understand about what front-enders do and vice versa, you know, it removes the need for these sort of like unicorn T-shaped people that are like the glue in the middle of your team. You know, the person that you always go to and she's like, she understands how the front-end works and how the back-end works, and you're like, can you please tell me? So that kind of, you know, these are gotchas, but at the same time, you know, they can be looked at as advantages if you want to spin it for the marketing team in a talk, you know. So yeah, it's not all bad. And finally, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I just want to say, this is a picture of me in a high visibility suit that was 2 sizes too small. I went to see if I could fit in, and I did. Look, so that's yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. Anyone? Yeah.
Do you run into issues where, let's say, a GraphQL fragment or a sample set of data that you're using to represent in a story, could it become out of sync with the actual data model that's used on the website?
Yes.
Where it's like the responsibility of that developer to update Storybook's sample as well as
yeah. So it's funny you should say that, because I was literally speaking to a colleague of mine about this about an hour ago. So for me, that's like a sort of team cohesion and hygiene issue. So like, as a back-end developer, I know like we're trained almost to like, because we need to get things done, like care about what you're producing, like what you do, and if you take great pride in what you do, that's great, but like try and get it out the door. So often like maybe we could change a GraphQL data producer and then we don't reflect that change in the front end. Say we change a field name and then all of a sudden it stops working in Storybook and someone says, hey man, why does this not work anymore? Weren't you working on the breadcrumb? So like, yeah, that does happen. It does happen. For me, that's if the back-end developer changes something that directly affects the front end, it is also their duty, to me anyway, to update the front end. And not only, you've seen how easy that is. I mean, like, to create the stories in Storybook, it's not difficult. Even for the most back-end oriented of back-end developers, it's not difficult. So if they don't do it, it's because they're really busy or really lazy.
So then, moving to GraphQL as the assumed way that Drupal will provide data to components.
Yeah.
You've removed most need for pre-processing
Yes.
in Drupal, right? So
Yeah.
Currently we do the same thing as well. We've got component libraries in Pattern Lab, and of course Drupal comes along, pulls those components in by name, but then it's like, well, now you do the heavy lifting in Drupal, and you
Yeah.
ensure as long as you meet that data contract, you get your pre-process set up, it works fine. But it always feels like there could be a better way. So how did you get your team on board with like Drupal's using GraphQL? GraphQL is now the sequel, the sequel of components or whatever.
Yeah. First of all, like, I'm not just saying this because I know people like to big up their teams and stuff. So I've worked at Amazing Labs for 7 months. So like the decision to do that was made before I joined. But like, we have some like crazy talented people, and I thought I was like a really good developer before I went to Amazing Labs, and I was like, oh man, like imposter syndrome kicks in again, you know. But we have a crazy talented lead developer that oversees everything called Philip Melab, and that guy is like a genius. So he was basically showed us, look, this is the advantage this is going to bring us, and it also helps us bridge the gap with fully decoupled things, and it means that, yeah, there's a little bit more learning and contribution in the short term, but actually in the long term, like, it provides much more clarity, especially like the example you used, like no more pre-processing and things like that. If you're all you're caring about is the I guess the abstraction layer, which is GraphQL, and the implementation technically doesn't matter. It's almost like an interface if you look at it like that. So yeah, so like that was essentially it. But yeah, it was led by Philip, and if you ever get the chance to see him do a talk or a webinar, like I would really recommend it. Like you will learn so much. Yeah.
As like a culture, it's as we start to introduce these like things that make life easier for developers, like Storybook, it can become a pattern of, all right, it works in Storybook, so ship it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's not always like the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We like that. I get that. I guess that's again comes down to like we want to make like our front end developers more aware of the impact of what they do on us as back end developers and vice versa. So yeah, if it looks good in Storybook, ship it. That is technically the right thing, because then like there shouldn't be after that too much more work to be done because of the way this works. Like you're reusing the same templates. So really, as long as like that contract is properly written with the data producers and GraphQL, then it should work. There's always going to be edge cases and stuff. Like one of the things that I was going to show you, but we kind of ran out of time, was like embedding a view using code, because that is still like a lot of people get a bit kind of antsy, like, oh, you shouldn't be embedding it with code, but like it's not actually a terrible thing when you look at it from like the progressively decoupled way of doing things. You know, it does fit the paradigm, but then like Storybook's like, how do you embed a view? I don't know what a view is. You know, that so there are gaps. Like, you know, it's not perfect, but you know, but it's a good start. And like I think, and as we develop this more, because we've not been doing this for an awfully long time, as we develop it more, it gets easier and easier.
Hey, tomorrow at 4:15, Stu is going to be presenting on Twig, or GraphQL in Twig. So if you're interested in that, there's a little presentation just on that. And we should let the next.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Thank you, everyone.